Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have with me Ming. Ming is a very successful entrepreneur, not just one business, but multiple businesses. She's the CEO of Jumpstart Marketing and co founder of Villainy Beauty, speaker, author, a massive advocate for mental health. And most importantly, she's the mother of unicorns. Welcome, Ming.
Thanks.
Okay, I have to start out by asking you, mother of unicorns, please explain.
This actually comes from the startup community. So I've mentored in Startup Weekend for quite a while.
Mhm.
I've been a mentor for, I think, close to 10 years now. And I'm known as the mentor that makes grown men cry.
Love it.
I'm the mean one.
No.
And really what that means is I don't want people to mortgage their home for their stupid idea.
Yes.
And by stupid idea, I mean false validation. So they've run around convincing themselves that their idea is the bee's knees and the best thing since sliced bread, but they haven't done any proper validation. And that's to take it to market or take it to strangers. Because your friends and your family, as much as they are wonderful, will lie to you.
Yep.
And that's so and I've often had people thank me, even though I've made them cry at Startup Weekend, because they've realised that actually they needed to really get out there and really validate and not just jump straight to building it. Because on the other side of things, and I just want to clarify, my company name is Marketing Jumpstart, not Jumpstart Marketing.
All
But I
right.
might need to do SEO for that. So on the other end of it, in my marketing company, we get people with their cap in hand going, look, we've spent $500,000 on app development. We don't have any money for marketing, but surely marketing will fix this. And the problem is for a poorly validated business idea, whether or not it's an app, software, business, whatever, if you haven't properly validated, marketing is only going to make a bad idea fail faster.
Yes, this is very true. Yeah. Yeah. So many questions. So, what creates this culture, do you think? Like, why do people madly fall in love with their idea without really talking to strangers and without really figuring out whether anybody wants this and then continue to spend often mortgaging their house, like you said, and getting money from their family and friends behind this without they don't even know if anyone creates this.
I think a lot of it is having this idealistic dream. I think a lot of it is the things that we read in the news and the stories of all the successful business owners. Like we look at people like Bill Gates and we look at people like Mark Zuckerberg who all failed university. Well, they didn't fail, they dropped out, right?
Mm.
They actually dropped it. But they also pivoted and they also broke things and they also made a lot of mistakes and learnt a lot of things and surrounded themselves with the right people to make the right sort of ideas come to life.
Yeah, but we only hear the success stories, or I think we hear of the crazy people, like the Elon Musks of the world who have complete conviction in their idea and go after it no matter what happens to he doesn't really care. He just cares.
And if you have all the money in the world, then that's fine.
You know,
By all means. But I can guarantee you he's made a ton of mistakes and spent billions of dollars on those mistakes. And certainly we've seen some of those mistakes live on Twitter. I mean X,
Mhm. Yep.
So I think there is a lot of lessons that we can learn, and sometimes just having an open checkbook isn't necessarily going to solve your problem. I quite like the fact that I built my business from nothing,
Mhm.
and I built my business and scaled my business and grew it and employed people and did all of those things without a big checkbook.
Yeah, because you had constraint then, which I think constraint is the mother of innovation.
It
You
makes you thrifty.
you had to get customers that paid you for your products and services, otherwise you couldn't keep going.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so tell me a bit more about your entrepreneurial journey. I really do think anyone that starts businesses, particularly women, it's so inspirational. And like, I want to know, did you have a job at some point in your life? And
Yeah.
what did you go into business? And then what were
Uh,
your failures?
I was a career employee and I would have stayed there had they not gone against their own organisational values, one of which was our people and our customers are everything to us. And I had worked extremely hard. I was one of the youngest female managers to get promoted into management. I was top of the class in terms of sales and business development. I was extremely good at like closing deals and just growing a business unit, to the point that I ended up becoming also sort of an impromptu unpaid trainer that went around and trained all the other managers in the organization. And I was asked to reapply for my job. And I wasn't asked because of anything I'd done wrong. I was still the top performing manager. I was asked because the state manager, I believe at the time, was threatened by me and thought that I was gunning for his spot. And I was the only manager at the time that was asked to reapply for their job, and I told them to stick it. And decided to back myself instead, and chose revenge.
Yeah.
Revenge. So vengeance was a good motivator.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I always think I've heard these stories before where, I'm just going to say women, but everybody really, but especially women, we get to this point where we go, okay, enough is enough. Like, I am no longer putting up with this, and I'm going to now back myself completely. Not just go work for someone else that perhaps, is a bit nicer, but going, no, I'm going to create the rules, which sounds like that's what you did.
100%. And I guess there's another challenge in that, where I walked out of one organization and walked into my own organization thinking I knew a lot and not realizing, I don't know if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger cliff, but there's and then
I know everything. I know nothing.
Pit of despair. Yes. And I've been in business for 14 years now, and I think why I get so passionate about the startup weekend is it's like a shortcut for the first 6 months to 12 months of your business. If I'd gone to a startup weekend, I would have saved so much time in my own business, not realizing that in my own business I was pivoting. Like, I originally started my business as a tech training organization because I thought everybody wanted to learn how to use their tech. And what the reality was everybody was going back to the Telstra store to learn how to use their tech. They weren't Googling it. But I had false validation, right? So I created all this validation in my head going, oh, there's definitely a market here. I'm seeing them every day in my store.
Yeah, that's right. That's because they're all coming back to the store seeking advice from anywhere else. Wow, that's really fascinating. And I think it's the echo chamber, isn't it? When you're starting your own business, sometimes I think you just think, stuff everybody else. I'm sick of listening to everyone else. I'm just going to do my thing. And
100%.
Unfortunately, that's also what gets you in the end, because you still need customers to buy your products. Like, even if you are doing your own thing, you're still always reliant on other people in some way or form. But so how did you then, you started as a tech organization and you pivoted, the word that startup world loves, of course, as though it was just very simple. Oh, this is not working. I'll just...
Another way to put it is I followed the money.
And how did you find out where the money was? Like, what was that?
I got introduced to somebody at a baby naming ceremony, of all things, to a wedding celebrant who was doing the ceremony. And he was like, you're using social media. I think at the time we had like 165 followers on Facebook. So, and he's like, you're using social media. Can you train a bunch of wedding celebrants who are all around about 50 years or older how to use the internet? And at that point, I was like, yep, sure, I will sign up to anything at this point.
Yeah.
That was probably in that very early stage, that was one of our biggest jobs. I think I got paid like $3,500 for that job. And it was like a 2-hour seminar. I still have clients from that I work with today from 14 years ago.
No.
And I taught them how to use Facebook, and I taught them why it was important to use Facebook, and I taught them why we were using Facebook, and then all of the things that they hadn't looked at and the buttons that they hadn't pushed. And I realized one of the very unique skills that I have is that I'm a relentless button pusher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good skill to have. Yeah,
I'm quite fearless in it. Like, don't give me the nuclear codes or a red button.
You will push it.
I'll push it 100%. I'm like, what does this do? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So So you shifted from that, and then how did the marketing company?
So we did training in social media, and when I really properly started my business and was getting customers, it was teaching people how to use social media. So it was teaching people how to use Facebook initially, and then hilariously I ended up on Twitter because of a Facebook event that was run by Facebook, and they were like, "Hey, tweet us on Twitter," and I was like, "Well, I guess I'm joining Twitter now."
Yeah.
And then as it sort of grew, it became like I used to run these digital disconnect retreats, which was about teaching people marketing. And there was a lot of confusion around how they were going to learn marketing without actually having technology. And what the whole point of that was that people really struggled with their own sense of identity and their own sense of self. The technology and social media is not hard. It's actually really not that difficult.
Yeah.
The difficult piece is really owning your sense of self and being okay with putting it out there publicly for the rest of the world to see.
Yes. Oh my God. So well said. I just think, yes, I hear this so many from coaching clients as well, is it's not that they're afraid of creating a post on social media. They're worried about what the post looks like. They're worried about what people will think. And I have to say, it's literally going to be half a second of someone's attention out of 50,000 posts. They're not going to.
100%.
So
It's a blip. It's not even a full stop in a sentence. Like your one post on social media is not even like an apostrophe or full stop.
It's not worth 4 hours on it.
And I've had clients more certainly numerous to count at this point that have had like a 45-minute to an hour panic attack at the idea of doing a 10-word status update on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them grown men. So, and that's okay. I understand the anxiety because that's trauma.
Yes.
That's bullshit and trash and trauma that you've been taught from a young age that you're not worthy, that you don't deserve success, that whatever the story is that you've got carrying around in your head is the thing that stops you from this greatness.
That's spot on. That actually brings me to the question I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see people making when it comes to marketing? A small business starting out or relatively small.
Mistakes probably not the word I would use. I think it would be misstep. And the misstep, I would say, is they will spend an inordinate amount of time investigating, researching their competitors and mimicking their competitor. Not realizing it's not their brand, it's not their voice, it's not who they are. And they go, well, it's successful for this person over here, so surely it'll be successful for me, right? And they don't, they're masking and, again, pretending to be something that they're not and just replicating somebody else. And there's a big piece about branding is how you make people feel.
Yes.
And how they feel every time they taste, touch, see, hear your brand.
Yes. Yeah.
Every time they look at you, they go, yep, that's Ming.
Yep.
Or, yep, that's Isis. That's the things that people look for, is that familiarity and that consistency. And that's one thing, is the branding and the consistency piece. A different part of the consistency piece is even just regularly posting. They'll do one post and go, well, that didn't do anything. Social media is a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And go, social media is a waste of time. And they're looking at one singular post in isolation in an ocean of posts coming from thousands and millions of people all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And they've spent 4 hours on it. So they feel like their return on investment was
100%.
Right. It's also
100%.
the amount of time and effort and emotional energy.
Well, that 4 hours is emotional energy. A post shouldn't take you one post should not take you 4 hours. One post should take you 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So there's that. And I think the other thing is people often go to sell. So they'll have an image with lots of text, which doesn't really suit people's brain psychology anyway. We see a wall of text and we go, nope, scroll to the next thing.
Too hard. Yeah. Entertaining.
And even Facebook for a while, they said 20%, no more than 20% text on an image. And people thought that was some sort of arbitrary rule or, weird rule for Facebook to put in place, but it was actually because they understood the psychology of it, and people don't respond to a wall of text.
That's true. Yeah.
So understanding
something that grabs your attention.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, the language of a brand is also that branding piece. So,
Yeah.
I know you and I have spoken about this
Yeah.
in different conversations where we've talked about brand personalities.
Yeah.
So, for me, I'm the magician. And
Hmm.
quite often, people's experience with me is the magician. They go, holy crap, you knew all of this stuff and you've pressed all of these buttons and you know more about technology than I've ever met in one person. How?
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like magic. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't want people's experience of me on the internet to be any different to the experience they have of me in person.
That's really key. Yeah. That's a really profound statement there. You want to show
I
up who you are.
100%. I have met people online and then I've met them offline and I've been a little disappointed because they weren't the same person. If
Congruence.
you're a low energy person, be a low energy person on the internet. If you're a
Mm,
high energy person, be a high energy person on the internet. But on the flip side of that, a lot of people then go, well, I've heard this a few times. I have to be a high energy person on the internet.
mm.
Why? Who? According to who?
Yeah. Yeah, this is very true because again, it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning where you're doing things what the competitors are doing. You're looking to someone else to be someone else that you're
Yeah,
not because you're not okay with who you are. And people
yeah,
see that, right? Customers will see that you are fake or inauthentic. You're pretending to be. There's plenty of quiet people out there who want to see quiet energy
100%, 100%.
and resonate.
Like I've done bloody drinking cups of tea on TikTok.
Sounds
This
peaceful.
is some, this is some of my best performing videos. Just because I'm like, I've got anxiety. You probably have anxiety. I'm going to drink a cup of tea. We're going to call it anxiety.
I love that.
Like I don't, yeah, like, and again we come back to that whole having an acceptance of your sense of self, and we think about the idea of we're doing all of this pretzeling, we're
Mm,
pretzeling ourselves out of shape of not being ourselves in the hope that people will accept us, only for them to reject us
yeah, they're like,
still.
actually, I like burgers, not pretzels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so we're still rejected even though we're trying so hard to not be ourselves.
it's utterly futile, isn't it? It's completely,
100%.
but it sounds almost like the journey of starting your own business and experimenting with it was also a way to actually discover yourself and to discover, in a way, how you show up in front of other people.
I actually think that came well before my entrepreneurial stuff.
Right.
I think a lot of that was actually because I'm biracial.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm half Chinese, half Swedish, Australian made.
Good combination. Yep.
Imported bits. I've just got imported bits. But I'm like fifth or sixth generation Australian on the
Yeah.
Swedish side as well. So,
Okay.
so there's long and deep roots in Australia.
Yeah.
And I had to get a really good grasp on who I was because of that.
Mm,
Because in school, all the Asian kids, not all, most of the Asian kids didn't want anything to do with me because I was a half caste.
mm.
And all the white kids didn't want anything to do with me because I was Asian. And so I was like, well, I can't win that argument. Those are things I cannot change.
Yeah. And how did you navigate that as a young? That would have been quite difficult because it's all about belonging when you're that age.
I navigated that. Yeah, there's not enough money you can give me to go back there.
Yes.
I always felt like the weird kid, and it didn't help that I had a father who would show up to school and pick me up wearing a white lab coat,
Oh no.
and it didn't help. And again, nothing. I love my mum, and I need to say that first. But my mum is she's 4 foot nothing, and she comes up to here on me now. And so
Yeah.
by the time I was 7, I was taller than her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's difficult to navigate because kids are mean.
And
They're
height
so
change is
they're
huge in Australia.
so cruel. They're so
Yeah.
cruel. And so I was getting relentless bullying at school, and like kids are just kids, and that's how it is.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I was still an entrepreneur back then.
Hmm.
So, like, my actual first business was in year one, selling painted pine cones. I'd spray paint them gold and silver, and I'd sell them back to the kids at school for Christmas decorations.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
That was like year one.
You're like, and it probably give you a sense of control and belonging in a sense. Like your race didn't matter, what you look like, what your mother looked like didn't matter. You're selling this thing and people
Money
want it.
was universal. Money and commerce and capitalism
It
was universal.
definitely, it can surpass everything. Yeah, it can cut through.
Yeah, so I always find that amusing, is that, that whole navigation piece. And
Yeah.
like, I had a couple of meaningful friendships as I got a little older, but like, the older I get, the more I realize there's a little bit more complexity to my neurodiversity
Mm,
that I'm currently working on, that we're all working on, because we're
yeah.
all sorely underdiagnosed as women.
For sure. It's masked. Women are so good at masking any sort
Yeah,
of mental health conditions,
100%.
issues, anything, because we're like, we must, we must pretend to be the same as everybody else. We should not be abnormal. Yeah, it's not okay. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's
I had to be really okay with myself and not fit anywhere. And I didn't fit anywhere. There was no box that I fit in neatly that
yeah,
was like, yeah, this is. So I was like, I'll just build my own box,
that's
and
really
I'll just collect all the other weird kids, and we can all just
hanging out together.
and I still didn't really do that until adulthood. And I think a lot of that as well was kids, as much as adults, learn to mask quite early on and
Yeah.
pretend to be something they're not. And so I have a knack where people often become truth tellers in front of me
Mm-hmm. Same
and
old.
reveals themselves in ways that they've never really revealed themselves to other people before,
Yeah.
because I am wholly and completely myself,
Mm.
and every day that's under review.
And they feel
Every
safe to
day,
feel.
every day it changes. Every day I have a different interaction, I have a different conversation, and it changes who I am.
Yeah.
Right? So I like the concept of Buddhist non-attachment to yourself.
Love it. Yeah.
you know,
Because
you
you
don't.
are not the same every day.
You're
Even
not the
the
same.
body changes, the voice,
Yeah.
anything. Nothing is permanent.
Yeah.
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 I love
So
that.
I like the idea of that, and I like that there is an honesty that comes with conversations with me, which scares a few people because
Of
they're
course.
quite scared of being themselves
It's
or revealing
confronting.
themselves.
Yeah. When you speak to someone who is so themselves, they can say what they mean without worrying about perhaps what other people are thinking. That's scary. It's sort of reminding you that, oh, I want to do that too, but I'm not sure if I'm brave
Or
enough.
they're trained in subtext, so they're trained into believing that people don't always mean what they say, and
Mm.
they'll think she means something else. And it's like, no, the words that are coming out of my mouth are exactly the things that I mean. I'm very specific with my language, and I'm very specific with my words. There's no subtext. And like, I remember having that conversation with my partner. We've been together for 5 years now. And originally he would get upset because he'd create his own subtext in that conversation. And I'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah. What I said.
What's going on, man? Like,
Yeah.
that's not the thing I said.
Yeah.
He's like,
It's the
oh,
thing
but
that
he
he heard.
meant this. And I'm like, oh, I didn't though.
Yeah.
Cool story, dude, but that's not what's going on.
It's what I think you made up.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know you did.
So, and there's a great sentence that sort of follows on with that is, I am who I think you think I am.
Yep. 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 I like that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you reflect out into the world the things that you are actually are and truly are, you're only going to reflect them back into good people.
This is very true. So I want to hear a bit more about your mental health journey. We touched on it a little bit, but let's dive in a bit. I know you're a big advocate and you speak openly on social media, which I'm so grateful for because it makes other people feel less alone. Because no matter what, how many Are You Okay campaigns there are, it's still there's still stigma around. Even the word
100%.
mental health, I think, to be honest, it needs to be rebranded. It's as though it's something separate, that it's not part of who we are. But yeah, I'd love to hear a bit about your journey, and particularly, what point did you start speaking up about it? And yeah, how's that impacted who you are?
I've probably been speaking about mental health for close to 10 years, maybe a bit longer. How long ago now? Yeah, just over 10 years ago, I had a fiance who died in a motorcycle accident
Mm.
5 minutes from home.
Mm-hmm.
And that was catastrophic.
Yeah.
It was a catastrophic event. And Western society does not cope particularly well with the idea or the concept of grief.
Grief. Yes. Yeah. Get over it. Kind of.
There is a discomfort with grief, and there is a discomfort with a deep sadness and a deep grief and a deep grieving. And I had so many people who were like, just get over it. I had one person who was like, there's plenty more fish in the sea. And it was like, there is something that truly breaks in you. And I can't speak to anybody else. I can only speak to my own experience. But there was something that really broke in me on that particular day. I had the police come to my door. I had to identify his body. I had to do all of these pretty traumatic things and pieces. And the thing that you don't realize is the thing that you're grieving is your future.
Yes. Yeah. Your imagined
the imagined created future that you've built together, and suddenly that other person is gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, it probably took me a year. I would spend every single day screaming myself to sleep and every single day screaming myself awake, because I didn't want to be asleep, because in my sleep he'd be in my dreams.
Yeah.
Or I'd have like just wild dreams, or my brain would try and figure out how he died, and I'd just be on a repeat loop doing that. And I'd wake up and he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for a good solid year I hated my life. About a month or so after he died, I got to a point where I was pretty solid on suicidal ideation. I was thinking of ways of ending my life, because again, he wasn't here and I didn't want to be here.
Yeah, of course.
And really what it was I didn't know how to get out of the pit of grief that I was in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
And because I didn't know, I just, like, death seemed like the best solution.
Yeah, the way out. Yeah.
And I've quite often said at a lot of my Are You OK talks that none of us really want to die.
Yeah.
We just want our situation to end.
Yes. We want the pain to go away.
Yeah. But death is forever. Your situation is not.
Very hard to see that when you're in that pit of grief, isn't it?
100%. So originally I started blogging about grief because I was so alone in it, and I'd made a couple of friends who had lost loved ones, like conversations with a woman named Kobe Steele, who runs the Orangutan Foundation. She had lost her daughter, and we'd had a conversation, and I was like, does it ever go away? Does grief ever end?
Yeah.
Is this forever now? Is this my life?
Yeah.
And I know a couple of times I've floored her with my conversations, and I really just needed hope. And so I started writing, and at the times I would share those blogs with people who'd lost loved ones or lost somebody, and they were like, oh my God, this is my brain right now, I'm feeling. And so that's sort of where that started, of sharing my story, sharing my journey, sharing so that somebody would feel a little less alone, because I felt so alone and so isolated in that. And so that month went by and I contemplated taking my own life, and I had the means to take my own life, and I ended up calling Lifeline. And what was funny, it was about 4 months prior to that, I didn't even know about Lifeline. I didn't really know what they did. And I'd been invited to a luncheon with a guy named Vince Garaffa, who's a big Perth personality who owns Mondo Meats.
Yes.
And he has a Lifeline brunch that I was invited to, and I helped with the social media, and we raised something like about $300,000 that day.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that was like 3 months before my partner had actually passed away. Oh no, not even. No, it was like, it was way just before, I think actually 2 weeks before he died.
Wow.
And so I had it very clear in my head. It's like, well, hooray, I helped raise $300,000. They can afford one phone call from me.
Yeah.
And I remember the person on the phone, she had an Irish accent. She was just so wonderful. And in the month that he had died, she was the first and still only person that had asked me about his life.
Wow, really?
Everybody else had asked me how he died. So I was fixated on that and
Yeah,
reliving that and
yeah,
refocusing on that. And she was the first person to ask me about his life. And that was the switch. That was the switch for me in my head going, yeah, actually, his life was so much more than his death.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
he like he
incredible.
lived a full life. He experienced everything that could ever be offered. A couple of us joked that he used to party 80 years worth of parties in 33 years. So
Yeah, yeah. He did it all. Yeah.
just did it all. And so it sort of became my mission to go, okay, my life isn't going to end like this.
It was a
I'm going to
reminder.
live my life and experience it and have all of these feelings. And there's a beautiful interview with Andrew Garfield I think it's with Stephen Colbert, where he talks about the death of his mother and the grief of his losing his mum.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that so deeply. That's,
Yeah,
grief is a gift.
yeah. So I feel like that conversation gave you the opportunity to channel grief into initially the story of your partner, to actually be able to tell the story, and then that story reminded you that you're still a living story.
Yeah, 100%.
You've still,
Um, and
yeah.
so that's sort of become in part my mission is to it was in the beginning, his story was going to become this thing that would help others to find peace and hope.
Mm,
And then it really actually became my story because there's so much more that I had actually gone through that I wasn't dealing with that grief kind of unraveled.
yeah.
And I grew up in domestic abuse. I grew up with psychological abuse for a solid 17 years. And there was PTSD and anxiety disorders that came out of that I wasn't dealing
Mm.
with because I was being a workaholic,
Masking it.
masking it,
Yeah.
pretending,
Coping mechanisms, all of it.
pretending I was okay, just filling everything with as much busyness as humanly possible so that
Yeah.
I can't stop and think for 5 seconds. Can't stop and think for 5 seconds. If I stop and think for 5 seconds, I might die.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it'll all come hit you all at once, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so what have you noticed in the last 10 years working in the business world and startups? How mental health is viewed, treated? You're obviously also an ambassador with Are You Okay? What shifts have you noticed? Good and bad.
It's definitely shifted for the better, I believe. Like, we still have people who do surface level bullshit that's, coffee and cupcakes and that's it. That's all they do. They don't actually know how to have deep, meaningful, engaging conversations. I
Yeah.
think on the flip side, people are often feeling ill equipped to handle some of the trauma that comes up for people that they don't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot recommend enough getting the mental health first aid certificate, even just to equip
Really?
you on
Okay.
how to manage those conversations and not take ownership of it
Okay. That's
and
what's,
be able to hand it off to the appropriate person.
yeah. Yeah.
Because that's such a big piece where, especially if you've come from trauma, you want to kind of fix it for everybody else. You don't want them to have this hurt or this harm or this pain or this stuff going on for them,
Yeah.
because you're also trying to fix it in yourself at the same
Yes.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And quite often as coaches, and I think you and I have had this conversation, is we attract ourselves.
Yes. We attract
So we
other
have to
people.
do the work. We have to do the work. We have to show up for ourselves
Yeah.
so that we're not pulling out our own trauma out of other people and trying to fix them
Yeah.
when it's not necessarily our remit, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But that mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, there's a place for everyone at that table and at that conversation that's so necessary and so important.
How do you balance the between being vulnerable, holding space for people to have deep and meaningful conversation without going into that deeper space that a therapist or a counselor can hold? When people start talking about their difficult topics, where do you know, Where's the line?
I will ask, so quite often I will ask people if they have a psychologist or a therapist before I start working with them. I think it's important.
Good idea. Yeah.
And I'll quite often inform people about a mental health plan, which most people don't know about.
Yeah. I find that's surprising too.
Still don't know about. So,
Yeah.
you can go to your GP, you can do a small quiz, and they will assess you and refer you to a psychologist or a counsellor or whoever for mental health support. And you get 10 sessions a year covered by your Medicare.
Yep.
So, get them. They're there. Use them.
Yeah, and there's no stigma in it. It's a very simple questionnaire, and if
you need a buddy to go with you because you don't go to the doctors very often, and sometimes some doctors' bedside manner are terrible, and certainly my doctor at the time, her bedside manner around my mental health was not awesome.
Yeah.
And thankfully I did have a good friend who was well informed in that, who was able to sit through that with me. Like there's so many services out there. There's apps, there's meditation, there's like a bunch of stuff. And like certainly when I was going through the worst of my grief, I did it all. I pushed every button. I did everything. I did all the therapies. I was like, I'm gonna, much like I do my life. I was like, I'm gonna run a sprint for a marathon.
Yeah.
Floor. That's not equality. It's a floor.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I'm gonna do grief like a sprint. No.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. You're gonna be successful and get an A grade in this.
Yeah, no.
You will know every book and every podcast, and you've spoken to 4 therapists.
I think the longer I've coached, the more I have learnt where that line is.
Yeah.
And the more I've given guidance to people to go, hey, talk to this person, or hey, have a conversation with this person, or have you spoken to anybody in your family? And that, like, the whole Are You Okay process is not about you being a coach or a therapist or even remotely trained in that conversation. It's just about, okay, well, what resources can we resource you up with?
Yeah.
Because you also might not be the right person.
Yeah.
I might not be the right resource.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've always noticed that at some point in the conversation, and like you probably, people are attracted to me sometimes in a sense because they're going through some hard stuff. And it's always the people that have gone through it that can, yes, pick me, please.
You seem like you're on the other side of it. You can help me. You can fix this.
That's right. And I often, there's a point in the conversation where there is this discomfort, and it's that whole listening to your body, and which we don't do enough of, me included up here. It's like, I'm like, ooh, now this is going into a realm where I don't think I can hold space much longer. And, some people like yourself, you're very good at speaking about the difficult things and knowing how to put a boundary around it. You're not expecting me to be a therapist, but then there are others where I might be the first person they've ever spoken to that listened to them about this and didn't judge them. And I always now have to remind myself, okay, this is the point where, like you say, I suggest like, hey, I think it would be great to talk about this with a psychologist. I can tell you my psychologist is amazing. I can refer you to this person, or and there is no shame in this. And that's a really nice way to get them to come out of the deep they're going into without re-traumatizing. So it's okay to have these vulnerable conversations, not be scared of it, but also know when you've hit the limit of where you can help them and where this might harm them. So I think all those resources you mentioned are fantastic. And definitely. And the other thing about Lifeline, you probably do, but Lifeline has counseling as well. They have a counseling line you can call. They've got relationship.
I've told people to go get financial counseling. Go talk to Lifeline for financial counseling.
Yeah.
Or your EAP. If you've got an employee assistance program in your workplace, go use it. It's there.
Yeah,
it's
and it is confidential. They're bound by law that it's confidential.
I've had people who are like, oh, but it'll
come back to mine.
No, like one of the conversations I had years ago, or a few actually, I've had a few of them, they were like, I'm concerned it'll impact my life insurance. It's like, okay, if you're concerned it's going to impact your life insurance, are you planning on doing something? That's my next question, actually.
Yeah.
I've pulled a couple of those people aside and had conversations and said, hey, you might think you're covering it, but you're not doing that great a job.
Yeah.
Here's the steps.
It's wonderful that because sometimes it's just being acknowledged when you're in that dark place. There's someone just just to be able to give voice to what you're planning to do or what's going on. And
I
that just
think
takes the sting out of it. That takes the kind of energy and momentum behind it. It's not such a big deal anymore once you've voiced it out and go, okay,
I
I'm in a
think
dark.
that's I think that's what we really want is we want to be seen.
Yeah, and heard. Yeah, and
Yeah,
validated.
yeah,
Like you're okay to think those thoughts. You're not a bad
yeah.
person. It absolutely happens to many of us.
Life happens to
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah. And I think let's get you some ways to help you move out of it because
Yeah.
life is worth living, right? Like it's so I want to wrap up, but I want to ask you this. I guess it's sort of tying some of the things we've talked together a little bit. One of the concerns that I do see is when you are running your own business and you have your own startup, particularly startups, mental health seems to be a big thing. Like people are burned out or they have high expectations from investors. Or often what I hear from startups is, I've got so many competing things to do. I'm just overwhelmed. I don't
Yeah.
know which, because I'm worried if I did this, I do that. What advice would you have for people running their own businesses, startups or not? How do you manage stress, mental health issues?
There's a few things there.
Yeah.
Some is, are you stepping over dollars to save pennies?
Mhm.
Are you doing a thing because you're free? Clearly, right? You don't need to get paid. You can do all the things until you can hand it over to someone, until you make enough money to hand it over to somebody, which never happens because you always continue to do it. So, first of all, have a think about all the things that are not your genius zone that you are trying to do, i.e. marketing. Admin's my biggest, I can't.
Yeah. It's life draining.
I love our bookkeepers. They are godsends. They save me so much time.
Goodness, what I keep
You
on
know, and
talking
there's
to keepers. Yeah.
Oh my God. And there's so many like tech and tools and technology and stuff out there that helps save time and helps give you back your time. You know, I think Fireflies was my greatest find this year with my coaching sessions because it just notates everything, gives me a summary and gives me all the tasks that need to be done. So I don't need a VA or a PA to go and listen to it, or I don't, which really that was me because I was re-listening to it and taking all the notes and doing all the things. So it's just saved me
Yep.
so many hours of life.
Depend on tools and
Yeah,
people who can do the
100%.
things that you don't want to do and you're not good at. Both.
Get experienced advisors. Work with people who've actually are a little bit further ahead of your journey. Doesn't have to be the same type of startup. Can be a different startup. Doesn't matter. Like, you know, having those mentors of people who've got those experiences that can point you in the right directions.
Really important.
But make sure they've actually done it and they're not just talking a load of crap, because there's
Which
lots of
there
people
are.
that do that, unfortunately.
And I always say to startups that I'm advising, it's like, hey, this is just my opinion. Take it, put it through your filter of your values, your mission and purpose. And if you don't like it, please ignore it because you'll hear, I'll say this, someone else will say this, but you have to put it through you and they shouldn't be offended. A good advisor should never be offended or worried if their advice is not taken.
Not at all. Yeah.
That's what I think. And a question I had before that I wanted to ask you, you brought up marketing again, and like spending time on free sort of making these posts for social media versus spending money on ads. What do you think is the balance there?
Ads is a really good fast track test.
Uh,
You'll learn a lot from it.
yeah.
So Google Ads, what a lot of the things, and I'm not talking about the AI automated Google Ads, I'm talking about proper search campaigns. You can learn a lot about the behavior of search from what people are inputting to find you.
Yeah.
What people are actually actively searching for. And like Google is just it's the place where everybody asks the question that they want to be answered, and your business is quite often the answer. So, are you generating content that then helps inform that Google ad machine and the Google SEO and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Social media is the second place of validation. So once they've found you on a website and quite often that works in reverse, and I certainly built a business that went in reverse where people found me on social media, followed me for about 2 years, then went to my website and then bought something that I did, so there's definitely a reverse metric that works. Google Ads is certainly faster and far more validating because you'll get immediate conversion, kind of.
Yeah.
Usually like within 2 to 3 months. Again, if it's a novel idea that's new and nobody else has done it, I am always a word of caution with that, because if it's new and novel, you might often have to spend a lot of time educating your audience.
Yeah. I hear this a lot
Um,
from people, but
yeah,
I just need to educate them. And I always think,
you're educating your competitors. That's who
yeah,
you're educating.
that's very true. How much time and money do you have to spend educating, or can you build a different thing that people,
There's a problem with being the first mover in the fact that you are educating your entire audience for your next competitor.
yeah, yeah,
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you've got to be ready in 2 to 5 years to pivot or
yeah,
change or innovate or whatever that looks
have
like.
money, energy, and passion behind you. And some people do,
Yeah,
and good on
yeah,
them. But
100%.
if you, it's okay if you don't. Like, it's
Yeah,
okay if, I think that's the other thing too, right? It's okay if you don't want to start a business or you started one and you decided, you know what, I'd rather go back to my accounting job, even though the boss was a bit of a pain in the ass. Like, trying to find customers is more of a pain.
it's, it's
So it's actually, there's no shame in it as well, I think. I think that's really important. Ming, thank you so much for being so authentically, beautifully yourself and sharing some really personal stories as well. I really, really appreciate it. It's so wonderful to talk to another woman who's intelligent and vibrant and happy to get down and dirty, into the hard places and the happy places. So thank you.
it's a pleasure.
Great.